Hello and welcome to another installment of Lost in Translation. This time we're talking about another Saban show, Bad Beetleborgs. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers lit the world on fire in 1993 as a runaway success and merchandising giant. So of course Saban Entertainment did its best to replicate that success and flooded the world with more American, Japanese hybrid shows, as well as possibly the worst Ninja Turtles show. The year is 1996. The Power Rangers movie, while successful, had failed to meet its large expectations, and the third season showed a decline in ratings. Masked Rider and VR Troopers were cancelled. Things looked dark. But Power Rangers managed to come back stronger by reinventing itself for its fourth season, Power Rangers Zeo. With some renewed vigor and interest, it was time to try and make another show. And that show was Bad Beetleborgs. Like Power Rangers, it relied on elements from a different Japanese show called Juko B Fighter. The show did really well during its time. It was cancelled after 2 seasons, but not because of poor ratings, but because there wasn't enough usable Japanese footage. Which is weird to me considering how little Japanese footage is actually used in an average episode of Beetleborgs. Nonetheless, the show died and has faded into obscurity. While Power Rangers has a lot of faults, when I watch it, I have a genuine fondness and nostalgia for it. When trying to rewatch Beetleborgs, I just realized how bad it was and really question why I liked it as a kid. So why does Power Rangers have a cult following that remains loyal to this day, while Beetleborgs is just that show people remember liking as a kid? Well, let's find out. Part 1. Juko B Fighter. So let's talk a bit about the source material. Power Rangers was adapted from Super Sentai, which is a series of superhero shows in Japan. B-Fighter is an installment in a different superhero series called Metal Heroes. Some key features of Metal Heroes are that technology plays a larger theme and the suits look more metallic and robotic. The plot of B-Fighter is pretty simple. The Jamal are an interdimensional race of beings that invade various realities through use of a giant hand. Their coming is sensed by the insects and animals of the planet. Our main character, who I will call Dr. Protagonist, stumbles across the mystical sage guru who warns him of the upcoming plight and that the insects are banding together to fight off the evil. Dr. Protagonist vows that humanity will also fight, and Sage Guru responds with a, well, whatever, humans kind of suck, and then leaves. We get introduced to our other characters, Dr. Hippie and Constant Death Stare. The aliens invade and people are underwhelmingly prepared to fight off the threat. Dr. Protagonist is trying to build some robot suits, but his protagonist powers have not yet leveled up to the point of granting life, and is powerless as the Jamal invade. Dr. Hippie and Constant Death Stare try to fight, but end up getting captured. Sage Guru shows up and decides that maybe he'll try trusting humans, and gives the suits powers formed from the condensed bodies of thousands of dead insects. That's right. Our heroes are powered by the souls of thousands of dead insects. Juko B Fighter is formed and come together to defend the world. If you're worried about remembering all that, don't. Beetleborgs doesn't use any of this footage. They decide to rely more on American-made footage, which makes the show incredibly more complicated, but somehow less interesting. Part 2. The importance of the opening sequence. So at first, Beetle Rock seems to have a cool opening. We see a dark and dreary house. 2 young kids scream and run, and we see a hand reaching out for them. Awesome! Okay, haunted house, I'm ready for this. We're introduced to our main characters, Drew, his younger sister Jo, and their friend Roland. Just like with Power Rangers, I would say that Beetleborgs actually does a better job of characterization than B-Fighter. The problem is that, well, I'll just show you.
The new Beetleborgs just came in an hour ago.
Awesome. Had to pick up Joe here from Little League.
Oh, and don't forget to mention we creamed them royally, thanks to my supersonic spinball.
Modest, isn't she?
Is Heather working today by any chance?
We learn that Drew has romantic feelings for Heather. We also learn that Jo likes to make life miserable for her older brother, and we learn that Roland likes existing and reminding people that he is capable of stringing words together to resemble things that mimic meaningful sentences. All 3 of our heroes love a comic book series called Beetleborgs, and this is our first exposure to the show's real premise, which will not pay off anytime soon. Power Rangers opens up its first episode by showing us the villains and letting us know that they want to destroy the world. Because the premise is established, the show can then take some time to flesh out the world and characters. A stronger opening for Beetleborgs would have been with Drew daydreaming about being a Beetleborg. You would show the audience the superhero elements as well as the main villains. Ultimately, the opening sequence, while being visually one of the best things in the episode, is a pointless waste of time. It in fact creates a bit of a plot hole when the two rich kids goad our heroes to going to Hillhurst. We just saw them running away in terror and seeing proof of a monster. Why are they acting like ghosts and monsters aren't real? Why are they not absolutely terrified of going back there? The lack of a good opening that establishes the premise of the show critically hurts the story and makes the rest of the episode a slow, pitiful crawl. You can only afford to meander in character and world building if your premise has been firmly established, which it hasn't, and that ends up being the harbinger of many more problems. Part 3. Characterization. Yeah, I know it's the same slide I used in my last video. I am lazy and unapologetic. This is the part of the show that is the weakest. The kids are just not very engaging characters, and literally everyone around them is more interesting. A good part of this is just that our child actors are only capable of expressing a limited degree of emotions. Joe is the only one that's even mildly interesting. I want to see the story of Nana. She looks like she'd be an awesome superhero. Power Rangers also had a problem with terrible child actors, but none of them were our main characters, so it was okay. If you're going to employ child actors, you have to be willing to spend the time and money to make sure that they are well prepared and equipped for the roles they are performing, which Saban clearly didn't do. While the characters in Power Rangers were a little one-note, they were consistent. The only character like that in Beetleborgs is Jo. She's the tomboy. She's forceful and spunky. Who the hell is Drew supposed to be? Is he supposed to be the genius? When he gets his telekinesis, he refers to it as brain power, but he doesn't do anything smart the whole episode. It could have been a really good distinction between him and Jo. Jo is the tough one, Drew is the smart one. Drew can brag about his test scores while Jo brags about her sports accomplishments. Drew could even try to impress Heather with his knowledge of science or something, but fail because she can't understand what he's talking about. I think because Drew was supposed to be the leader, the writers and producers wanted to have their cake and eat it too. They wanted Drew to be nerdy, but if he was too nerdy, no one would take him seriously as the leader. This results in a character who is milquetoast with no clear defining qualities, making it hard to relate to or like him. This is okay when you're a kid because you can project yourself onto Drew very easily, but as an adult, even looking at him makes me want to sleep. As much as I've just hated on Drew, he's not my least favorite character. That glory belongs to Roland. What is Roland's role in the group? I think he's supposed to be the clown, but he isn't funny and he doesn't try to be. Roland's family owns and runs the comic shop that everyone likes to spend time at and visit. The only reason he seems to be in the story, though, is because B-Fighter has 3 characters, and so Beetleborgs needed to have 3 characters. Even his civilian power is kind of lame. Jo's super strength is an extension of her personality, and makes sense. Drew's telekinesis would have made more sense with some minor character tweaking, but why does Roland have super speed? The answer is because they needed a third power, and somebody realized super speed hadn't been used yet, and that's a cool power, right? An easy way to make it work would have been to have Roland always in a constant rush. He has to help his family run the store, so he's always busy and stressed out and doesn't feel like he has enough time to get everything done. There. Roland now has a distinct character. I mentioned projection while talking about Drew, and I think projection is a key factor in explaining Beetleborg's success when it came out, but current lack of strong fan base. As kids, we could all project ourselves onto these characters, and that was awesome. They were living our dream. This doesn't work as well when you're an adult. You can't project yourself on these kids anymore, and even nostalgia goggles can't overcome that adversity. In order to prove that they're not cowards, our heroes are ready to go and get the actual plot of the episode started. With a poorly constructed premise and characters, we're ready to enter the poorly constructed story. Part 4. Lack of story focus and purpose. I am pretty confident that the pitch meeting for Beetleborgs was like this. Alright, let's do Power Rangers, but with kids. They literally become their favorite comic book superheroes. Awesome, but as kids, they need a mentor figure. An alien gives them superpowers? Yeah, we've already done that. Let's have their mentor be a ghost. Okay. Maybe their base of operations can be a haunted house. Yeah, that's great! And there can be other monsters there too. Why? Well, no one will believe that a haunted house is only haunted by a ghost. We need other monsters in there too. Okay, fine, sure. We can do that. We can make this work. They didn't. So let's talk a little bit about Juco B-Fighter again. B-Fighter is kind of weird. Our heroes fight the villains in suits powered by the souls of thousands of dead insects. But B-Fighter doesn't waste time establishing its story or premise, and everything that happens in the first episode relates to the premise somehow, making it very easy to digest and enjoy. Beetleborgs, on the other hand, is sloppy. Remember how this show is supposed to be about child superheroes? You'd think that the first episode would be a good place for them to get and use their powers, but they don't. It's not till the start of part 2 that they get their powers. Because of this, the first part is paced at a slow, pitiful crawl that isn't much fun to watch. They spend over half the episode's runtime just dicking around in the Hillhurst house. There's nothing wrong with a fun chase scene, but it goes on forever and doesn't add anything to the story or characters. The first part should have ended with the Beetleborgs getting their powers and fighting off the monsters, and then end with the reveal that the villains have escaped the comic book world. The premise could have been firmly established, as well as ending the episode on a cliffhanger that actually propels the action in the following episode. One of the other big problems with the show is Flabber. Even as a kid, I never really liked him. He's annoying, obnoxious, and takes up way too much screen time. And that's all that really needs to be said about Flabber. I can only imagine how the conception of his character was ironed out. Hey, so you remember that ghost mentor we talked about? Yeah, I'm working on making him a wise and... Yeah, he's gonna be like the genie from Aladdin. The genie? Yeah, from that hit Disney movie, Aladdin. It's really popular and everyone's talking about it. Let's make Flabber like him. We gotta get on this while it's still hot. Aladdin came out 4 years ago. Yeah, but King of Thieves is out now. Nobody likes that movie. Make him more like the genie. He makes a lot of dated pop culture references and is eccentric. We don't want Robin Williams to sue us though, so let's have him act like Elvis. You know what? I don't care anymore. That's the spirit. After a brief fight scene, we finally get introduced to the series antagonists, the Magnivores. And they are way more interesting than the heroes. When I was first rewatching this series, I was afraid I was just going to see them as annoying and obnoxious as Flabber, but I actually really like them. They are incompetent in a way that's charming. One of my favorite scenes is when Jara realizes she can't eat popcorn because she doesn't have a mouth. Typhus is the only one that can eat because he was gifted a mouth on his head. It was actually funny and clever. I would say that Jara, Typhus, and Noxic are some of the strongest characters in the series. They manage to always steal the scene, and it's a real shame they get sidelined in favor of the Hillhurst monsters and conflicts. So, going back to my hypothetical better way to pace the episode, let's say that the first part ends with the reveal that the villains have left the comic book world. Let's also say that the first part opened with the daydream I mentioned where we saw these villains being evil. Now there's some tension, and the second part would begin with that tension. The heroes don't know what to do. They have to find these villains before they do something awful. It's revealed to the audience that the Magnivores are idiots, but Joe, Drew, and Roland are still worried and concerned and are on the lookout for them. In this scenario, the tension of the heroes and the silliness of the villains could work together to make a charming experience. While the Magnivores definitely steal the show, they come in way too late into the story to salvage it. And Vector, their leader, doesn't do anything to establish himself as a serious antagonist. All he basically does in the whole story is say, "I'm a bad guy." And that's just not compelling storytelling. Part 5. Conclusion. The sad thing about Beetleborgs is that there are elements to like about the show. Kids becoming their favorite comic book superhero is a premise that everyone, young and old, can relate to. And the monsters are fun, schlocky characters. The show even has some great visuals. I love the transformation sequence. Unfortunately, not enough work is done to make our main characters fun. They're relatable, but they're not at all engaging, which makes the central part of the show's premise as equally unengaging. At its core, Beetleborgs is two completely different shows mashed together. Since so little Japanese footage was used anyway, the whole superhero angle could have been dropped to shift the focus completely on the monsters and the mansion, and the conflict surrounding that. The heroes could even still have their civilian powers as part of their wish, which they used to keep the monsters in line. Or just cut out the monsters, leaving only Flabber in the haunted house, and put more focus on the conflict with the Magnivores. Either one would have made the central story more focused and engaging, and would have allowed the audience to not just project themselves onto the characters, but also love them. Maybe then we'd have a yearly BeetleCon as well as a Power Morphicon, and maybe Beetleborgs would have a new movie coming out this year. Well, that's all. If you want to watch Big Bad Beetleborgs, both seasons of the show are available on Netflix. While I would recommend Juco B-Fighter, it has never been officially released in the West, and as far as I can tell, only a handful of handmade subtitled episodes exist. Thank you for watching.